From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Doc Staples bringing you the Unconquered podcast with Doc Staples. This time, the Hot Takes edition after Florida State drops their third in a row to start the season for the third time in the last 50 years, the second time in Mike Norvell's tenure. And looked pretty ugly, at least on one side of the ball against a decent Memphis team, but a team that you have no business losing to in this. And as I said in the preview, you lose to this Memphis team in this context, and it's kind of time to push that emergency button. It's time to pull the ripcord on some of that, and that's where we are. This there's really not a whole lot of lipstick to put on this pig at this point. Offensive side of the football, this was a defense that you needed to be able to run the football on. I said, look, they should be able to run for 200 yards, 5 yards a carry. They had 24 carries for 37 yards, including 9 carries by Uyunglele, who had the most carries of all ball carriers. Now, some of those were sacks. Let's see the actual number of sacks here. So 4 of those were sacks, the other 5 there. And looking at the advanced numbers, Florida State averaged 3.5 yards per carry, sack adjusted. So taking sacks out, 3.5 yards per carry. And guys, that's not going to get it done. I mean, I'm not saying anything anybody else doesn't know on that. And, when you brought DJ Uyunglele for this season, you did it under the expectation that you would be a run-heavy football team and that you'd be able to essentially set up the pass with the run and be a, high success rate team. They came into this season or into this game, I believe they were 100th in the season or 100th in the country in success rate. And they weren't a whole lot better today. And then you add to that they brought a quarterback in who essentially you depend on being a high success rate team to set up the play action passing, because that's what he does. And actually, we saw one of those today, finally. The first time that we've seen him uncork one and let it go downfield on play action for a long play. It's the one really positive play of this game, the 67-yarder to Malik Benson. But other than that, I mean, this is just, you are not going to win playing the kind of football that they're playing. And the other thing that I don't quite understand on this is if you are going to be a run-heavy team, if you're going to be a running football team, you can't give the football to Toafili 4 times, Cam Davis 5 times, Roydell Williams 5 times, and Keziah Holmes once. You got to hand the football off more. And this is un-Norvell-like to drop the running game as quickly as he has in certain of these cases. Now, granted, they're running it perfectly fine on that first drive, get 2 nice run plays to start the game, and then third play of the game, you have essentially a snake bite type situation where guys actually carrying it well. It's not a bad ball security thing. Helmet goes in the ball and you fumble. And Norvell's got to be sitting there at this point going, are you kidding me? But still, you have to come back and continue to chop wood and do what you can do on that. The thing that I think they actually should be doing right now, I'm looking at this. Toafili, 4 carries for 30 yards. He had the 124-yarder. He should have gotten... Toafili's the guy that they've actually got to get the football to a little bit more, which is, if you've been listening to this show for a while, that's kind of funny for me to be the one saying that, but I do think that's true. And, Cam Davis looked okay in a couple contexts, but again, not quite enough. And frankly, the offensive line has just been an enormous disappointment compared to what they were expected to be coming into this season. And at the end of the day, I mean, the what this is about, more than anything else, is chemistry. This team still just does not look like it is fully interested in being out there and playing. They don't look like they're having fun doing what they're doing, which, I mean, it's never going to look fun when you're getting beat, but they don't look like they're interested in doing all the little things. The attention to detail is not there. Now, you see some guys trying too hard at times, but all of that to me is a consequence of a team that is not fully bought in. This is a team that, you've watched Ted Lasso, believe. This is a team that does not believe. And they've not believed pretty much all season. Because when you believe, when you get hit in the face, you just keep moving forward, you keep bobbing and weaving, and you keep doing what you know you are going to do. And there's a confidence, a swagger that's earned from that you believe. This team, you got guys that are trying hard, you've got guys that are kind of checked out, you've got a combination of a bunch of things, but what you don't have is a bunch of guys who are actually bought into one common goal, that are actually confident in the approach that they're taking to that common goal. You have a bunch of guys that are kind of looking around and unsure and not confident. And the consequence is bad. And the other thing is that, if you look at the pieces that were put together on this roster has a lot of talented players on it. I mean, we saw Malik Benson's talent finally show today. He finally got some opportunities. Cam Davis is a super talented freshman. You've got a bunch of guys that are talented. But, chemistry does matter. And, you can clean with bleach, and it's a really powerful cleaner. And as long as that's what you invest in and that's what you're going to do, it works really well. And for certain things, it's the best cleaner that you're going to have. You can also clean with ammonia. Right? Ammonia does a good job on a lot of things. And certain, Windex, for example, has ammonia in it. The normal Windex does. And each of those works perfectly fine as a good option, as a cleaner. But you never want to combine those two things, because you're going to get something that is, the sum is worse. The sum is less than the parts themselves. And that's kind of what this football team is right now, is that the whole is lower. That was the phrase I was looking for. The whole is less than some of the parts. And honestly, I don't know what you do to fix that in season. If you're 3 weeks in at this point and you're losing this game to Memphis, quite frankly, I'm not sure that they have the answers on this coaching staff or in this locker room. Simple as that. Defensively, things went basically as expected. I mean, I projected them to average around 4.5 yards per play. They averaged 4.7. At the 65 rushing yards, sack adjusted rushing yards per carry, looking at 2.9 yards per carry. Those are right in line with the expectations. 20 points, right in line with expectations. I had them at 17. And that's, by the way, 20 points with those 3 turnovers that really benefit them in those contexts. So defensively, if everything else just kind of goes as it should, you hold Memphis to 10 points, you win the football game. The defense played well enough to win this game. Still didn't play well enough. There were a lot of additional things that, they just didn't do very well. There's still major communication problems on the back end. You still have major coverage issues with certain linebackers on the field. There's, the safeties are getting picked on. There's a variety of different problems. But, your defensive line, for the most part, showed out. Marvin Jones Jr. is still for the most part a no-show. And there's actually a play where they dropped him in coverage and he's chasing down the ball carrier from behind, and he's running right with him. He's fast enough to catch him. Thing that's crazy to me is if you watch that play, he actively avoids running at that player, the ball carrier, and tackling him from behind. He just kind of runs along with him and waits for someone from in front to actually make contact. He doesn't want any part of the possibility of somebody from the front making contact while he's making contact from behind, and he just makes a business decision. That is lazy, that is selfish, And that is what you're seeing a lot of from this team. Offensively, DJU is going to get a lot of the blame, and deservedly so on certain things. You know, I found myself at different points going, what in the world is he doing? Pull the trigger. But it wasn't all on him. You know, Keziah Holmes had the one drop on a screen pass that if he catches it, it might well score. There was so much out in front of him, and nobody within the zip code. If he just turns and does that, it's not only a third down conversion, but he might score. Drop. Third down pass on target to Darian Williamson. Drop. You get exactly the screen look on the outside that you want. You get exactly that look. And you're going to get, I think it was either Benson or Jaylen Brown. It was Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown on the catch. You get exactly the look. It's two in the stack. They've got 1/2, a deep safety over that. And you pitch it out there like you're supposed to on the read. And Ja'Kai Douglas just watches, just stands aside and watches the corner take the inside angle and make a big hit on Jaylen Brown for a loss. And that's another thing. The blocking from the wide receivers has been abominable from some of these guys. And it's just, I mean, that's selfish play. That's just poor stuff. In every phase of this team, you've got major issues. And, you know, again, you got to figure out what you're going to do from here on that. Now, I actually, you know, I'm getting people that are texting me and saying, you know, they got to pull the plug. They got to move on at quarterback or whatever. And I'm still not persuaded that that's the right move against Cal. I think you have to wait until you lose your first conference game or maybe 2 conference games to pull that plug. Because based on everything I understand from practice, DJ Uiagalelei still gives you the best chance to win, believe it or not. But he has to have some support from other places. And there's not a whole lot of that right now. And, you know, the backup quarterbacks, eventually you've got to find out what you got there, but you can't really find that out at the expense of development of other players, at the expense of, you know, potentially finding ways to gain some momentum and win games. You still have to do the most you can to give yourself the chance to win the most games. And again, if I were persuaded that there was a good option on the bench right now, then yeah, you make that, you pull the plug to get a spark. I'm just not sure you have that. Now, again, I'm not in the meeting rooms. And, you know, if you feel like there is an actual spark that is more likely to win games for you, then you pull the plug. But yeah, that's where things are. Guys, this is not a good football team. And, you know, I've gotten some texts of, you know, is this the worst football team Florida State's had in, you know, however long? No, actually, I'm not sure it is, which is crazy. I mean, that team that lost its first 3 games for Mike Norvell in 2021 was a bad football team. And this team might well beat that team. A couple of Willie Taggart's teams probably lose to this team. But we're talking about spreads that are like, you know, -1. This is close. And in terms of quality of team versus collection of physical talent on the roster, this is probably the worst team in school history. Just is what it is. And take a second. Thank my sponsors. As always, Louis Marquez of Momentum Realty, Jacksonville. Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. And Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky with a much higher level of service and play and unselfishness than what the team that we're talking about actually exhibits. But they're going to have to figure some things out. Now, I do think it is absolutely clear. One thing that is absolutely obvious is that at the end of this season, you've got to make some staff changes. I've got my own opinions on what changes need to be made, but I do trust Mike Norvell to make changes. I've been getting texts from people saying they need to fire staff tomorrow. Guys, you're 4 weeks into the season, or 3 weeks really. You're 3 weeks into the season, because you had a week 0 game. You're 3 weeks into the season, and you can't just go out and fire a bunch of staff 3 weeks into the season. Even if you're going to fire guys, you have to wait until later. It doesn't do you any good to fire them at this point. It just means that you have fewer people to do the same work. But at the end of the season, some guys need to make some changes and replace some things. You're also going to have to. The sad part about all this from Florida State's perspective, and from Mike, and the frustrating part surely from Mike Norvell's perspective, is that this kind of thing is what it basically tanks your momentum to be able to continue to build through the high school ranks the way that you want to shift to. This kind of season means you're going to have to dip more into the transfer portal again for next year, just to be able to regain some momentum and have some players that, aren't inexperienced and aren't going to have problems. And you're going to be 1 year further behind in terms of being able to attract some of the guys that you want on the recruiting trail. Now, I do think if immediately after the season, you're able to make some changes, the right changes, bring some guys in, I think you can potentially attract some recruits where if you hire the right recruiters, they may sign on just to play for that guy. But we'll see. It's bad. And when you look like this 3 consecutive games, it's not good. Understatement of the season, right? And there's just, like I said, I'm sort of at a loss because I don't see any natural fixes. I mean, I would say you've got to get more in rhythm on the offensive side and be able to snap the football with, more than 6 seconds left and get out of your own way. And I mean, the term, by the way, that kept coming to my mind in terms of what this offense looks like, it looks constipated. They need turbolax for fast, effective relief. This is an offense that desperately needs some turbolax. Or, if not turbolax, they need, super colon blow. Something, because this team plays so constipated on the offensive side. Nothing ever actually just naturally flows and works its way into offensive football as the way it should be. And like I said, I don't see a lot of easy answers there, because you built this team to have a specific identity, and that is to be good up front, to be able to run the football, play good defense, run the football, play action pass down the field to some fast receivers. And you can't run the football. You can't protect. Even if you do protect, your quarterback processes too slowly to be able to get the ball out and avoid sacks. There were a couple of the sacks that he took today were completely on him. The protection did break down, but it's on the quarterback to get rid of the football. Okay, look, I don't see that guy open. Get rid of it. There was one. The reason that they had to kick a field goal down in the red zone at one point, if you watch the end zone view, he's in position where he's looking one spot. He should be coming off to his one-on-one to the right, where you had, I believe it was Poitier on the right side. He was one-on-one matched up, and you've got a little post corner route in the end zone, little goal line route. And that's one where it's going to open just a little late. And the design is, if you don't see it here, you immediately get your head there and you throw that to the outside. And if he's on time and just shifts his eyes and his feet there, that's a touchdown, because the receiver won and has absolutely enough separation to win there. And instead, he just eats it and tries to find a rush lane where there isn't one. And look, he's not a runner. But again, it's one of those things where eyes come down a little bit and there are places to go with the football, and he's just not pulling the trigger. And even when there aren't places to go with the football, dude, you are not Fran Tarkenton or, Jaden Daniels or whoever, young people remember. You're not Steve Young. Live to see another play, get that ball out, and don't hurt your football team. And if you're a fifth year senior doing that, that's where, I do wonder whether or not you have to make the change. But again, you can't make the change if you feel like you're not going to be able to win with the next guy. But I think next game you at least have to have a drive or two with the next guy just to get an idea of what you got with the lights on, regardless of who that other guy's going to be. But yeah, this is, as far as Florida State program-wise, season-wise, this is DEFCON 1. And remember, DEFCON 5 means no action. Like it's no problem. Everything is as it should be. You're undefeated, potential national champion. DEFCON 1 is as bad as it gets, nuclear threat. Season-wise, this is DEFCON 1. Program-wise, this has probably moved into the DEFCON 2 area, DEFCON 3 area. Because you're in a position where the kind of momentum and toxicity that you're dealing with in terms of the locker room and in terms of overall program is a lot you're going to have to deal with. I don't really have a whole lot more to say. I'm not going to get into the X's and O's here all that much, aside from saying that, DJ, you also made some bad reads in terms of, run calls and that sort of thing on third down. Some of those things you got to handle. You got to handle the right checks correctly, and he missed a couple of those as well. So that's something else you assign that to that. But the fact of the matter is, if the offensive line, running backs, and wide receivers and tight ends take care of their business, this team's 3-0, even with how DJ Uiagalelei has played. But if you change out quarterbacks and you put another a bit of an eraser back there at quarterback, a guy who helps you rather than is a minus back there, then you probably also are 3-0. And kind of the way to think about it is DJ is kind of a force multiplier, one direction or another. If you can play action and run the football with effectiveness like what Oregon State did last year, he can throw downfield. He can do some stuff for you that actually can be, a net positive for you. If you can't run the football and if he's not getting help, then like I said, he's a force multiplier. He's going to be a little bit of an addition, just a tiny bit of an additive if everything is going well. If things are going poorly, he's shown in his career that he's not somebody that's going to actually rescue you. He's not going to help things. It's actually going to get worse. So then he becomes kind of an exponent where, he starts multiplying. He's a force multiplier in the wrong direction on some of that. So, and I don't think they have a guy, a Castellanos or somebody like that on this team would be 3-0 because he's a guy that's a bit of an eraser. A Jordan Travis on this team would be 3-0. And I did get this question from somebody as the game was ending, were the last couple of years Mike Norvell, or was it just really a loaded roster with Braden Fisk and Verse and Jordan Travis and the rest? Was it, Jordan Travis or Mike Norvell? And I think, first of all, that's a kind of nonsense question because, with every coach, Coach Bowden used to say all the time, the secret to being a great coach is having better players than the other guy. So, yeah, I mean, it is having Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and a variety of those players, Trey Benson. But who brought those guys in? Who had the evaluations and the foresight to bring those guys in and to coach them specifically? Jordan Travis was not Jordan Travis until Mike Norvell arrived. And it took him 3 years to develop into Jordan Travis. And they still schemed around some of his weaknesses. What the last couple of years show you is what Mike Norvell can be and how he can run a program. What we're seeing right now is also a little bit of what Mike Norvell can be, at least with this coaching staff. And there are other texts that I've been getting of how could Mike have brought this coaching staff back? Guys, they'd won 19 games in a row until the postseason exhibition game. You don't normally just go and fire a bunch of guys on your staff after you win 19 straight. But when you go 0-3 to start a season, yeah, you start prepping those pink slips, and I think that's going to have to happen. Truth be told, it's not a really good place to go here. All right, well, I've talked for long enough for this turd, and like I said, there's no polish in it. This is a bad football team. They're just going to have to continue to work and find a way to get better chemistry, find a way to make these pieces mix a little bit better than the combination of, bleach and ammonia. But right now, I'm not seeing a whole lot of answers, at least on the offensive side, because, offensively, general rule of thumb is you got to figure out what you're good at. And I haven't seen anything on offense that they're actually good at yet. So receivers don't block. Offensive line doesn't get push. They can't run counter. And quarterback isn't somebody who can carry you if he doesn't have other guys helping and can't catch the football. So all of that's going to put a lot of pressure on your defense, because I'm not sure that this team wins a whole lot of games where they have to score more than 20 points at this point. Long way to go, but like I said, this is DEFCON 1 time as on the season, and time to kind of pull the ripcord. If you've got other things to do on Saturdays this fall, it's probably better to spare your nerves and your frustration if you're a Florida State fan. So actually, one more thing before I go, and that is, I've gotten others who've been asking, is Mike going to be willing to make the changes? I mean, isn't he, going to be hesitant to fire his guys or whatever else? Guys, ask Chris Marv or, Woodson whether or not Norvell's willing to tell a guy to go find another job. This guy will make the changes that he sees are necessary. It may sometimes take a little longer. And again, coaches will typically default to the benefit of the doubt, because we're talking about livelihoods and jobs here, and not just, we're talking about people. But when it comes down to it, you got to win games. You got to have the staff that you trust to do that. I'm pretty sure, well, we'll get into it later in the season, but I'll just say this. Some of those decisions, I think, have already likely been made. And I'm not going to get into it exactly, but, these are the sorts of things that do happen in terms of communication and all of that among, within the coaching community and all of that. And again, Norvell is a proactive man. And at that, I will go ahead and leave it. Not a whole lot more to do. Go and enjoy touching some grass or something today.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. And thanks also to all those supporters over at Patreon, where I post video analysis and field questions for the podcast. I am especially grateful to those above the dynasty level. That is Andrew Garrett, Brian Leininger, Neil Cook, Casey Kidd, Chris Chartrand, Dave Blair, Hector Cartagena, Jack Horton, Jimmy Van, Jonathan Kennedy, Keith Cheney, Lee Caswell, Tyler Kashishke, Vince Calandra, and Bert Bertoldi. You all are far more generous than I deserve. I'm really grateful. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.